emissions. But still, yes, we want to be greener, we want to be more efficient, we want to be leaner in terms of consumption and leaner in terms of pollution. However, yes, we have a lot of things that we have imposed. We have GHG ratings, we have RightShip ratings, we have CII, we have EXI, we have all these figures and all these abbreviations that have been imposed in our industry and our daily lives and are affecting commercially everything that we do. Operating ships, ordering new ships, and in general, the mindset that we have to keep. What we need to know is that although these abbreviations, which come out of calculations, are badly set up and badly, I would say, thought of, some of these already have become extinct. Like the CII, for example, unless it is totally revised, it is an index that doesn't really reflect the quality. It reflects the operability of a ship, but not the quality of a ship, and not the potential of a ship. In any way, these are issues that create uncertainties, ambiguities, and risks. I'm going through these slides which were shown last year, because I want to go into the fuel for thought that we say here. So many different fuels, the fuels of tomorrow. Previous panels, all day today, covered this extensively, giving the SWOT of every fuel. In my presentation here, I have made a few good thoughts, I would believe, careful thoughts, coming from a lot of discussions with a lot of key players in the industry that present for every different fuel its strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I don't want to spend more time on these. You will be given these, and I hope that you will enjoy reading through it, but the essence of where we're leading today is here. We have seen examples, and I'm coming down to what was discussed previously, that being energy efficient and being leaner and cleaner has to reflect in an economic sense. And this is my most, I would say, vivid example of a ship that burns methanol. Out of all the fuels that I gave you for fuel for thought before, methanol seems like one example easier to be implemented in shipping and to be burnt in ships. However, I'll take the pure economics. We order a Kamsarmax today in Japan, in a top yard. We need roughly 42 million for a conventionally fueled, modern, eco Kamsarmax. 42 million. If that ship was to burn methanol, you would add another 8 million on its price. So we would be discussing an investment of 50 million. Let's take how fuel, methanol as a fuel, and how the fuel that we know compare with each other. Roughly today, the price of a ton of IFO is about the same as 1 ton of methanol. But because of its calorific abilities, you need double quantity of methanol to produce the same output that you need for fuel. So immediately, we're talking about double fuel expense. So if a ship burns 20 tons of fuel, it would need 40 tons of methanol, meaning instead of spending 10,000 a day on fuel, you would be needing 20,000 a day for methanol. And this immediately creates a huge problem. Who pays for that? Who is going to be there? Who is going to be there to pay the premium? Because you need a premium. You have a ship that costs 50 million versus a ship that costs 42 million. Are you going to be receiving the same freight rate, the same TC equivalent, the same time charter for 1 year or 2 years as a 42 million ship, an 8 million lesser investment? No, because you're greener, you want to have a premium for that. But you will never get a premium. And I'm talking in the future now, when we will be needing e-methanol, biomethanol, methanol that needs energy to be produced, to be totally green. That will not cost double, it will cost triple. or maybe 4 times. So leave the maths for you to think how a more expensive investment, which is green, can compare with a lesser green investment, a ship of today, which I will lead you immediately now to the next question. That Kamsarmax today, which you see here in the example, delivered from a Japanese shipyard at 11.5 knots, burns 12 tons of fuel only. You know how much saving this is from the eco ships produced 5 years ago, and how much the saving is from ships produced 10 years ago, or maybe a bit more, before the eco engines, the electronic engines, were introduced? We're talking about 37% less than the eco ships that today get a premium in the S&P market because they are the ships that everybody wants in the second-hand market. And you have a saving in excess of 50% comparing to the MC engine vessels. For me, as an economist and as a broker, this is the way forward, this is the way ahead, because these are the figures that give us already a huge reduction in consumption and a huge equivalent reduction in emissions. So if we want to be 2030 compliant from today, we don't need to risk in any different fuels. We just use the IFO that we know today, without any risks, without the crew needing to become highly educated or take unnecessary risks on board using fuels that are toxic and can kill anybody with a few ppms in the atmosphere. But now, here we come in the decarbonization footpath, and this is food for thought for the next panel with our distinguished panel members. But Apostolos, we will have about 1 hour and a half to discuss. We have a wild card. What is that wild card? All these ambiguities that I told you so far create uncertainties, but now we have a big wild card that can be used either for the benefit or not of the way ahead for future of shipping. It's called Donald Trump, the new POTUS, the new president of the United States. How is his administration going to change the footpath for decarbonization? This is a very, very important, uncertain question and topic. Will there be a shift in the US engagement with the IMO? That is the first question that I had in my deep thoughts. If the USA decides to pull out of United Nations and decide maybe that whatever you do, IMO, concerning shipping or whatever, doesn't apply to my green hype theory. It's BS, as probably he will say it. If the USA does that, how serious could this be for the decarbonization footpath, and how the IMO could lead its way ahead without the support and backing from the USA? This is a big question. I don't have the answer. I have the questions, and I have the anxiety, really, of all these new tariffs, new thoughts that he has put ahead, his administration has put ahead about penalizing Chinese-built ships. You will see that in a slide later. All these create a lot of uncertainties. Not that shipping didn't have uncertainties. Shipping is always revolving around uncertainties. And shipping always resolves around shocks. One of the reasons that shipping has the ability to adapt, has the ability to cater and find solutions, that's what makes shipping so grand. Because we always find solutions whenever there's a shock. These shocks create abnormalities in the freight rates, usually upwards, but they create also very many opportunities for people in shipping to find solutions. How are we going to find solutions now when all this is going to be considered green hype? How are we going to find solutions when fossil fuels and drill baby drill is going to be in the agenda again, or was never out of the agenda of Trump, but it's going to be implemented this time? How are we going to deal with USA being an exporting country in energy, because this is the after effect of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the United States has become a major exporter in both gas and both energy and both fuels. Is that status something that Trump is going to decide to alter? No. They will remain an exporting country because that's what brings down the deficit tremendously, and at the same time imposing a lot of tariffs on a lot of imports, because that's how he thinks he can create more opportunities domestically in producing rather than importing. And this is not something that can happen today, in one day, not in 1 year. It needs time. And maybe all these measures that the Trump administration has at least barked, because this is how we say that, you know, a dog that barks sometimes doesn't bite, but we don't know that. We don't know if he's barking too much just to be able to show that, yes, I can bite if needed. So this is another big question that I put on the table, and I put on the table of our next panel, of how all these barks, in quotation, can mean biting in the future. Because if what we saw now with Canada, it's a very apt example, and these are dynamic. I mean, what happens with Trump is something that we can prepare something in the morning, and by noontime or evening time, we need to revise it, we need to update it, because things that we thought in the morning were valid, by noontime they've been retracted. So again, fresh news, yes, tariffs on Canadian aluminium versus tariffs that Canada has imposed on energy, then further tariffs on top, and you know that would kill each other. So yes, they found a treaty. They found pulling back the tariffs for both. So maybe at the threat of being the 51st state, maybe that was, you know, one of the biggest threats that the Canadian Prime Minister, President feared. But anyway, we see a lot of barking, as I said, but there's a lot of analysis of what all this could mean in decarbonization. My biggest fear comes with things that are not yet implemented. To be more precise, it's about the US Trade Representative, the USTR, made a proposal which is going to be, I believe, discussed on the 24th of March, that's 12 days from now, on imposing tariffs on all ships built in China when they call to US ports. This is something that I can give you a practical example already, because this has not been just in the limelight over the past week, over the past 10 days. It happened, I think, from sometime in October, November. That was before or after the elections, or maybe just after the elections, if my memory holds correct. Still with the Biden administration. It was the US Trade Representative that made this proposal. So this proposal is on the table. It doesn't mean that it's already a law or it's been voted to be in effect, but it's on the table. And as long as it is on the table, it's a threat. And I see it commercially. I'm an S&P broker. What I do is sell and purchase of ships and new building contracting. So far, I've seen a huge change in the buying and the selling appetite. And I'll give you a practical example on that. I'm selling a ship which is Chinese built, which is 4 years younger than an equivalent Japanese vessel, for the same price. This was about the differential that they had. Now, the seller of the Japanese ship wants 1 million more in a falling market, in a market, let's say, on the Panamax and Kamsarmax, which has been correcting over the past 6-7 months. He wants a premium because he says, my vessel will not be affected by any Trump's administration or, you know, the trade representative laws. So you will not have any risks involved because I'm purely Japan built. And at the same time, a buyer that comes forward to buy the Chinese vessel, he says 2 million less from the asking price because that ship is might have problems in the future. So how do we tackle with this? How do we deal with this threat, because it's still a threat, when even if on the 24th it just doesn't pass as a law, it's still on the table. And what's on his mind and on the table, sometimes you never know. It can catch us by surprise. But just to see some statistics, we see that more than 43% of the vessels in the bulker fleet are built in China. A huge proportion, like 70% of the order book, is going to be built in China. Even if we want to continue on the decarbonization path and we want to proceed with building ships, we will not be able to find an alternative shipbuilding nation if China becomes tomorrow an obsolete destination. Impossible. Even Japanese shipyards that expand their capacity, like Oshima that bought an extra facility, they cannot double their output, despite the yard capacity has the ability to double the output because they don't have skillful workers. They have a lack of skillful workers. And how will we move forward when the nation that builds 65 to 70% of the new buildings today will be penalized? That's food for thought. I don't want to expand more on this. I'm just putting my concerns on the table, on the floor, and on the panel. Thank you very much.